Hello and welcome to Green Justice. Today we have part one of a special two-part episode in which Mark, Paula, and myself interview KPU students who speak languages other than English about how they talk about climate change and sustainable development in those languages. This took place at an event held by the KPU Climate Plus Challenge in conjunction with the Teaching and Learning Commons UN Sustainable Development Champions Initiative, which is something initiated in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And full disclosure, I'm a UN SDG champion. Mark is a Climate Plus Challenge fellow. Anyway, we found the thoughts offered by the students to be insightful and even profound. We think you will too, so enjoy, and there will be more to come.
So, can you just tell me your name?
My name is Sophie, Magyar, which means Hungarian in Hungarian, which is always a fun fact.
That's awesome. And so we were just chatting just now, and you're saying that Hungarian is your first language, and you're still fluent in this. And we're talking about nature and how nature it can be understood or framed differently in different languages. And so what comes to your mind when you think about how Hungarian frames the human relationship to nature?
Well, my first thought is actually a poem that is taught to kids when they're little. I don't remember the full thing, but I remember that the first line roughly translates to "Do not hurt the trees, for the trees are alive." And it's kind of like when, you know, how kids try to rip off leaves, it's kind of like the first instinct that a lot of them have. It's something my mom or my grandma would quote to me all the time because, like, don't hurt the trees, for the trees are alive. And then I felt like really, really bad for them. And then there's also a couple of poems about like animals and how they're like mischievous and there's like this anthropomorphizing of these animals. And it's like kind of meant to teach kids a lesson about how nature has its like own life that is kind of separate from us, but also we contribute and it contributes to us.
So there's kind of like a form of relationality there. And I like how you say like nature is like kind of informing us, like as humans, it's kind of, so it sounds like things are kind of like not in this hierarchical relation, but like more kind of like equal in a way.
I think traditionally that's what it would have been. I mean, right now we're very urbanized in Hungary and we were taken over like in, I think, the 13th century. So a lot of more Christian ideas have been put onto it as opposed to what it traditionally was. But originally Hungary was a shamanistic country. So there was a lot more respect to nature. And I think some of it does show through via the poems that like young children are taught.
That's super interesting. Do you have any, like, I hate to put you on the spot like this, but do you have any like ready to mind? Could you have any like just a line or two of a Hungarian poem that you could give to us in Hungarian?
The original version of The Trees Are Alive.
Yeah, sure.
It goes as this: Ne bántsd a fát, mert a fá is él, ne tépd a fát, mert a fá is érzik.
Okay, well that sounds beautiful. It's got an amazing kind of cadence to it.
It's a really cool language. We're one of, I believe, 3 Finno-Uralic languages across the world, and we're very isolated around Eastern Europe. So it does kind of show through, but it is really fun. It's a great language.
Are there any other kinds of examples that come to mind that kind of like demonstrate the kind of the vitality or aliveness of nature in Hungarian?
I mean, I think like a lot of the words used tend to be like that. It's like we tend to describe plants as like sap, which is like beautiful, and like we compare a lot of like women to flowers. That's like one of the big things. For Easter in Hungary, we call like the women flowers, and they get watered or whatever by a perfume. So it's kind of like a weird little courting ritual, but it's directly put through a nature metaphor where it's like you got to pick the girl and you have to water her so she stays beautiful, which means treat her well.
Do you think that goes the other way? Does it go to like how people treat nature? Like you have to treat nature as if it were a beautiful woman who you were courting?
I think sometimes. I think in like more rural areas, that idea is definitely a lot more common. Like right now, a lot of Hungary is very, very urbanized, but like specifically in big cities. But I know that at least where I'm from, which is kind of Transylvania region, so it's not quite Hungary. It's officially Romania, but it's really Hungary, or at least historically. I do think that there's a lot more of those more traditional ideas, like amongst my family at least, where it's like we gotta be nice to nature, we gotta like grow it, we gotta treat it nicely, because that's what we get from it as well. It's just like if we treat our garden well, it treats us well.
Right. So there's this sense of I'm going to mispronounce this word, but it's like reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. Thank you. Yes. Great. My last couple questions, just around like this climate change and sustainable development in particular. Yeah, climate change or sustainable development, are those concepts that you talk about in Hungarian?
I don't know how common it is in like the country proper because I don't live there, but I do know that my family and I have like lots of conversations about it. I don't know how prevalent of an idea it would be in the actual country simply because as a country it leans more conservative, unfortunately. Mm, So I do think politics are kind of tied into it more than I'd like. I think it could have been a big part of it, but I do think the fact of our current leadership definitely leans kind of against it because it's more of a leans more politically than it would towards a better future for the planet.
I hear what you're saying for sure. Yeah, yeah. No, I think that that's like it's a kind of a part of the sad reality of the slide to the right that is happening. Yeah. So, but just thinking about like the Hungarian words for climate change, does it tend to frame climate change as like a sort of a purely biophysical phenomenon, or would it frame climate change more as something that humans are responsible for?
I think they tend to do more biophysical, simply just like the way I've heard it. I'm sure that there are some like groups that talk about it a little more spiritually or like more in a way of like how the earth is doing as opposed to what we are doing to it. But I can't speak for those groups simply because I don't think they're the majority and they're not the main group that I have talked with. A lot of the Hungarian immigrants tend to lean towards the older side.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, any other thoughts that come to your mind when you're thinking about framing nature in Hungarian instead of English? Like when you think about, yeah, like how humans are represented in language, is there anything that you see as being kind of like different or unique or interesting about how Hungarian does that instead of English?
I know that in a lot of folk tales, nature is kind of presented as a refuge. Like there's a couple of folk stories where like a young woman runs away into the forest to avoid being married and she finds safe shelter in a tree and proceeds to be kind of welcomed in by a more supernatural nature leaning group as opposed to the humans. So I do think it kind of poses nature as a bit of a sanctuary and a refuge. I think traditionally it would be more along the lines of that as opposed to what it is currently.
It's super interesting, like how like our sort of folk tales, if I can call it that, like the stories that are passed down from generation to generation to generation, still kind of like embody this way of connecting with nature. That because you were saying earlier that Hungary comes from like this like a more shamanistic, pagan kind of background, and so that can show up in some of these old folk tales.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the actual ways that the origin myth of Hungary goes is that they followed a deer to the current like valley where Hungary started. And it was this like sacred deer and they followed it there. And then like these two brothers ended up creating our society. And it's like it's not like the main folktale or whatever that's told, but I do think it's definitely one that kind of leans towards the more shamanistic origins, which is nice that it survived because, as I said, we were taken over in the 13th century, so it's a miracle that anything remains.
Yeah, and stories matter, right? Like the stories that we tell, they matter. So thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
So your name again? Kritika.
Hey. And what language do you speak?
So I speak many languages like English, Punjabi, Hindi as well. So I would like to tell you in the language Hindi because it's my mother tongue. Yeah.
So how do you talk about nature and climate?
So in Hindi we speak like आज मौसम का कुछ पता नहीं लग रहा है कभी भी बदल रहा है कभी भी चेंज हो रहा है सो अगर मौसम सुबह सनी है सुबह धूप निकली हुई है तो दोपहर को बारिश हो रही है तो ये बदलता जा रहा है yeah that's it
Okay. So what did all that mean?
so yeah so it means like we talk about the climate change like in the morning it was daylight it was sunlight but in afternoon and the evening it suddenly changed to rain yeah so it like the climate changes we don't know like we can't say anything when the climate is getting changed day by day time by time yeah
Okay, so like unpredictability.
yes absolutely
Okay. And how does that connect to us as humans? So we don't have any control over it?
yeah we don't have any control over but we can assume we can always predict like by watching on the sky we can see we can like we can have a feeling like in the if in, we are going in the morning we have a feeling like yeah it's pretty much warm so it means like it is sunlight outside but like if we are feeling damp wet so it might be raining at another hour yeah
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you think about our connection to nature, do we see, nature as an object? Do you use like different pronouns, like gendered pronouns to talk about nature?
So for the nature, we don't have any different pronouns for that. But like if you want to talk about the nature, we just speak like कि in Hindi, we just speak like मौसम का कुछ पता नहीं लग रहा है. मौसम is like weather. In Hindi, we speak मौसम to weather. And it's like the nature is like पर्यावरण. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you speak another language?
I speak like 3 languages. Like my mother tongue is Punjabi. I also speak Hindi, and like I think English is my third language as well.
Oh, wow. So do you notice differences in how even just nature, or more specifically, maybe climate change or things like sustainable development are talked about in those different languages?
Like in my area, like where I came from.
Yeah, or just in that language itself.
Yeah.
Do you,
There's like a lot of like talks about sustainability and like just like renewable energy, because like I'm from Punjab, right? And my favorite, like my mother tongue is Punjabi, and like
yeah,
what we're going through is like a scarce of water resources, because like we are a farming state. Like you can say like almost 60-70% of like crops produced in India come from a Punjab region. But due to this, like all of our water resources are going down. So a lot of talks about renewable energy, like how to sustain water for upcoming generations, is like in the talks. Like a lot of policies are made about this. So I would say, yeah, it's
yeah, it's very much a live issue, right? Because it's affecting people directly.
affecting people a lot in Punjab. Because like you can say my family is a farmer as well. Like not primarily, but secondary. Like my father is a teacher, but secondarily he does own some land. And like almost like you can say 80% of people in Punjab are farmers. So it affects almost all of them.
Wow, yeah. And we've seen those issues around, the no farmers, no food, the issues around the I think there was like changes to kind of corporatize farms and that and push out small farmers.
Is the like in Indian government, I don't know if it's good or bad because I didn't really went into it. But what I learned from all of these bills were like they tried to like they wanted private companies to pay for like all the crops instead of government. The government wanted to give them like minimal rate, and the people were obviously weren't happy with that, because that's where all their income is coming from. Because my family has 2 jobs, like they're doing farming as well as they're teachers. Some people are primarily like living on agriculture, so it's kind of tough.
For sure. Yeah. But it sounds like for sure that climate change, environmental issues are very much real issues in the Punjab. Okay, great. Thanks. Can you tell me your name?
My name is Ajay.
Nice to meet you, AJ. I'm Greg. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So the first question would be, what languages do you speak other than English?
I can speak Punjabi, Hindi, English, and a little bit of Urdu.
Okay, that's great. And so what would you say is your home language?
Punjabi.
Punjabi. So how do you what's the name for nature in Punjabi?
We have a lot of words. Vatavaran, probably. Yeah. Yeah. Vatavaran. Haryali, that means like just greenery in general. Like if you go to like a park, there's a lot of greenery. Yeah.
And then what was the first word that you used?
Vatavaran. It's also like the vibe. Like I really like the Vatavaran of this cafe.
So there's like lots of different ways that these words can be applied.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I should also ask about your name. What is
So you know how no, I'm not trying to compare, but you know how Christians have like the Bible. So in my religion, Sikhism, we have our own like a book. It's not a book, like it's almost like our God. We don't pray to like figures or anything. We pray to that teachings in that book. So that book's name is Sukhmani. So I'm named after that book.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, that's like that's because I know that Punjabi has like lots of different names that mean something very specific.
Yeah.
And then for English speakers like myself, we don't necessarily know the names, like what they mean.
Actually, if you break down the name, Sukh means happiness, and money just means like a ruby or a stone. So like a stone that represents happiness, you could say, or peace. Yeah.
Great. And so when you think about like the human relationship to nature, and you're doing that like through Punjabi, do you get like a different feeling than through English?
Not really. Kind of embarrassed to say this, but I like it should be that I should feel the nature through my mother tongue. But the things that I've learned about nature and the way it can heal me is through English. Like I've learned those things through English. So when I think about nature, or when I talk to myself about nature, or when I just go out in nature, I think I tend more towards English because when you're talking to yourself in nature, you just sort of think, oh, it's really healing. Like you get into that serene mind space. So since I have heard those words in English, I cannot comprehend that in Punjabi. But sometimes, like when after I come back from nature, because it's like a mind recharge for me. So when I come back, I tell myself in Punjabi, like, yeah, that was good. Like
Yeah.
I need to do that more.
What would be, how would you say, like you just use the term mind recharge? How would you say that in Punjabi?
You could say mind recharge.
How would you, because it's a really important concept, right? Like going out into nature to get kind of grounded and kind of like at peace and come back to yourself. Yeah.
Brain
It's a-
means damag, so you could probably say damag recharge ho gaya, or like damag is like, it's
Right.
damag fresh ho gaya.
Okay. And so that would be kind of like a literal translation of the recharge. Yeah. Okay. Great. Where do you go for nature recharge?
So I live right like down the street. So there's a Princess Margaret Park. I don't like commuting that much. So I take walks to the park or Newton Park. Like it's not that much nature, but it's like something with trees, grass. It's good
And-
for me.
Yeah. And it's nice to go somewhere where you can get to by walking.
Yeah, really, because getting out just it really it heals you. I cannot even put into words like the thing I feel when I go out into nature or just go for a hike or I'm like nearby trees or anything. Like it's biologically it recharges you. Like people say when you walk on grass bare feet, it increases your blood flow. Like how can touching something in nature increase your blood flow? Like that's like mind-boggling.
It's interesting that I think you make a really, really, really important point here when you say that it's kind of beyond language, right? And so like, this in a way, like this whole podcast, we're thinking about how our language shapes our relationship to nature. But what you just pointed out, how there's parts of this relationship that we have with nature that are actually beyond language, which is like a super important point.
Yeah, like to me, like when I heard like, oh, I have to talk about nature, I could not even comprehend because I couldn't even comprehend in my brain like what I would say because it's just something, it's a feeling. I cannot put it into words. Like, oh, when you talk about love, you can say, oh, you feel this, you feel that. When I talk about nature, I cannot put it into words. It's just that rush of like dopamine, but it's not like electric rush. It's a more serene rush.
That's a really beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Nice talking to you.
Great chatting with you too. Okay, great.
All right. So could you introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Sophia. I'm Marika.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Thanks for chatting. So we're asking people who speak a language other than English how they talk about nature, climate change, sustainable development in that language, whether it's those words are used the same but differently, or whether it's like conceptual differences. So yes, I don't know any thoughts you guys might have in that regard. What languages do you speak other than English? What do you want to go?
Sure. I speak Russian and English, and I'm Jamaican, so English is my first language. But because so many words are kind of different between just standard English and how we speak it, things kind of change.
Like patois?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. Okay. So in Russian, how is nature spoken? What is the word for?
It's very feminine. We describe like the sun, the trees, like the land as a she, and it's really part of our culture to be like around nature and to surround ourselves with that. We have a lot of events that kind of take nature into account as well. But in terms of climate change, I don't think it's talked about as much as in Canada. And myself, like, I'm really passionate about climate change. So seeing like that a lot of Canadians, like Americans and Europeans as well, they don't really take climate change into account really is disheartening to me. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Your first point there about nature being more gendered, right? It's more feminine. Yeah. Because here we do have like concepts like mother, but there is like a certain gendered, feminized aspect to it, but also it's generally, especially in the modern times, right, seen as something neutral and kind of external, like we're separate from nature. Do you think there's less of a separation? How about in Jamaica as well?
That there is less of a separation. Most of my family comes from the countryside, so my grandparents right across the street. There's a river right there, and whenever I used to visit, it's we're very much connected, especially in my family in the region where we come from, because farmers. My grandfather raises goats every morning. He takes them out walking and everything like that. So there is that connection. For me, growing up, it was very apparent that, the earth is important, our environment is important, and we have to take care of it. And so, just all the different things that go into taking care of the space. If you go to the river, if someone was just there at this pool to wash, you clearly see that the water had been disrupted. The fish weren't out swimming. It's very visible. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that people say climate change specifically, but definitely that things have changed from what they used to be. So there's a lot more plastic bottles and bags that are just kind of like stuck in the river. There's less water flowing through the river at times.
So people can see the impacts, right? And
I could see the difference.
right.
Yeah. So it would be much more impactful difference for someone like my grandparents or
Right. Yeah. And here I think we see sometimes we see the impact, but a lot of it you don't, right? Because people are perhaps not as directly connected. But you were saying about Russia, there isn't a lot of awareness around climate change. It's not a particularly salient issue, I guess, amongst the public. Why do you think that is? I mean, I think here we pay maybe more lip service to it, but don't really do. Like the actual concrete steps that are being taken are pretty minimal, all right, to actually, going backwards and forwards. But at least maybe but maybe that's worse. Maybe it's worse to have some discourse around it, but there are no impact. I don't know if their thoughts in that regard.
I don't know. I think just the government doesn't really considers it as an issue. At least when I was there, I was from Russia and moved to Canada when I was 10. Never been there since, but like I have friends and like my family that's in Russia and they have never like once talked about climate change. And I also look at the Russian news sometimes and like they don't really consider that aspect. It's more of like they appreciate nature, but they don't understand that they need to like take steps to preserve it. And in here, our governments are kind of like really vocal about climate change, at least currently. And I think that's also, it helps because in Vancouver, like there's so much nature around us and like the mountains, and like there's a lot of hobbies outside, like running, hiking, snowboarding, all that stuff. So I think if people are more active in that sense, they take climate change seriously. But if they're not the type of person who has those type of hobbies, they wouldn't really understand the issue of climate change, I think.
Yeah. It's funny. I kind of think of Russia and Canada as similar in some ways. They're both vast countries, with vast resources, but they don't, a lot of it is kind of taken for granted, maybe. Like a lot of people have never been to northern Canada, I think never seen a bunch of the forests, right? So they don't really know what happens there. That's similar.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts you guys either of you'd like to share?
Good question that me asked Sophia a while ago. I know that the Jamaican government had banned their use of plastic bags, like years before Canada had, because they realized, this is kind of getting out of hand. They verbally acknowledged it. They put some things into action. And I know that there was also some efforts like coral reefs as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was something that I had learned about way before I had left. So I know that there are things being done, but I feel like there can always be more ways to reduce our impact on the environment and sort of reverse things. Jamaica used to be a global producer of bauxite, which permanently damages the soil. So once that's removed, you can't plant anything else there.
Yeah.
And the bauxite industry is completely dead now. Or almost completely, if not completely dead now. So
the legacy.
Yeah, because when I have to travel to see my grandparents, I take the new highway that's been built. And at some points, you're passing directly over the old bauxite fields, and you're just seeing a green, and then there's just barren grass. So it's a very stark contrast that it kind of puts into your mind that we've done things that it is,
Yeah.
I think we can.
Yeah.
I think also part of that kind of demotivates people to even try in the first place because they already know like how much damage has been done to Earth, and like we have that like the big clock of like the doom clock that says like how long we have left. But also going back, I think part of why people aren't really aware of like climate change and why we need to take it seriously is because we're in an area where we're not really affected. Like if you think about like Florida, that's the part like that gets affected by hurricanes because of the climate change and the weather changes. So we don't really see that here. It's just rain because it's Vancouver, and we don't really have heat like things anymore in the summer because I don't know, but we do have a lot of fires, but that's been constant, and so people don't really associate that with climate change.
Yeah, it becomes normalized.
Yeah.
I'm an old guy, so I remember when like fires around Vancouver didn't happen. Like you never had like smoke season then in summer in Vancouver. It was really like I think maybe 15 years ago that started, and it's become more. But people talk about it as the new normal. Right? Like it's just this is the way it is, right? And there's this inevitability and a sense of resignation to it that like almost even though they know that it's human caused, they don't really think of it that way. They just think of it still as something you can't do
Exactly.
about. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, many thanks to you both. Really appreciate that. That was great. Thank you.